Hey everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. As Oz mentioned, we have a very packed agenda for you where you will hear from the world's top AI builders, leaders, and researchers about how they are productionizing their AI applications and agents at scale. As we go along, please feel free to leave your questions in the chat. That, as Oz mentioned, we have a team of AI experts manning the chat threads, and they will respond to you. So feel free to leave your questions there. It's also like you're doing. It's fun to hear where in the world everyone is coming from. The AI community is global. We'd love to hear from you. So feel free to drop that in the chat as well. All right. So we essentially held the last Gen AI Productionize in February of this year, right, which was just 6 months ago. And the plan was honestly to have this be an annual event, but the world of AI is moving so fast. And we at Galileo, we've been in this market of language models for the last 4 years. And we've been so excited to see how quickly things have been moving over and in the 6 month increments that we just had to come back again and talk to the community and bring everyone together again. And in just the last 3 years, what has been fascinating to see is there have been, in the last 6 months, we've seen three huge shifts take place. The first one being a really big AI system shift, the second, an ecosystem maturity shift, and the third one being a builder shift. So, what does this mean? We'll go through each one of them really quickly, and would love to get everyone's thoughts on this as well as we talk through this. The first one is an AI system shift, where in a very short space of time, we've seen the AI systems put together become more nuanced and versatile, enabling us to build a lot of exciting products well beyond just chatbots, right? Like in early 2023, if everyone remembers, prompt engineering was all the rage. It kind of still is, but not really to the same extent. Back then, it was just a simple system with a prompt and a model, and we would just go off to the races. From then, we quickly expanded to include stored embeddings through RAG workflows, which gave us access to huge knowledge bases. It also forced the model providers to increase their context lengths to compete. And at the very end of the day, though, we realized all as a community that what we want to do is complete a task, right? And agentic systems finally enables us to do that. They enable smarter decision routing, classification, triaging, to actually complete tasks faster. And this has been a really interesting shift as well, which we'll hear about in a talk towards the end of the day from some founders of companies who are deep in the throes of this. But what's happened because of all of this is there's now a bunch of incredible agentic workflows and agents that have been developed across healthcare, accounting, sales, marketing, and more. And as a community, right, this shift has opened up a ton more opportunities to build very, very high ROI products, which is super exciting to see. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The second big shift that we noticed is a huge ecosystem shift. Right? The model developers themselves, the platform developers, they've come in and matured quite a bit in their offerings. So what we've noticed is as this AI system has matured, so has the model ecosystem. The model builders like OpenAI, Google, Meta, they've recognized that while just simply bulking up a model with more and more parameters is exciting from an accuracy perspective, the AI community really all they want is efficiency. And by efficiency, essentially, we mean higher accuracy for lower cost per million tokens. Because what are you going to do with high accuracy if you can't afford it? If you can't put something in production in the first place, what's the point, right? And so we saw a lot of the newer models that are coming up. They're using different kinds of designs. They're using different kinds of techniques such that they could actually reduce costs, but also we've seen some high accuracy from models like GPT-4o, but it costs $10 per million output tokens. Whereas GPT-4o mini came about with 60 cents for about every million output tokens. Gemini 1.5 Flash is actually really highly accurate, but is 30 cents for every million output tokens. And they're all seeing a consistently high context adherence as well. Like this graph is from Galileo's hallucination index. You can get access to that from our website anytime. It essentially talks about all the different models and how they perform across different task types in a very practical way. And you can see here the metric that's being used as context adherence, which is Galileo's metric around hallucination detection. The higher the adherence to context, the lower the propensity to hallucinate. And you can see with Gemini Flash and GPT-4o mini, it's actually right up there in the 0.95 range. So finally, we all have more efficient models to work with versus even like 6 to 8 months ago, we're all grappling with how we're going to put this in production. It's super expensive. So essentially, high demand for inference is driving a price race to the bottom, which is honestly great for developers. And as prices have dropped, we also seen context lengths increased, right? Context length sizes have increased to the 1 to 2 tokens range. But while this shows great promise and is a very exciting trend to watch out for, what we've also seen is practically a lot of these models still struggle with medium to long context length inputs. However, my bet is that over the next 6 weeks, because folks are realizing that in order to really win the model wars, you really need to be able to also adhere to medium to long size context lengths really, really well, which is not the case right now. So these exciting shifts in the AI system and cheaper models has led to a shift in terms of the AI builders themselves, not exclusively being the data scientists anymore, right? But increasingly what we're realizing it's also all the software engineers in the world. It's been super exciting to see how over 50% of people who are in the world of AI have the title engineer in them. So that the dawn of the AI engineer, as they call it, is actually here and has been increasing very, very rapidly. So we've seen over a 250x increase in generative AI in job titles. And this is purely from a title perspective, but at Galileo, we've been working with thousands of developers, right? And we've seen this firsthand where what's really interesting is from even 2.5 years ago when Galileo was working with NLP practitioners, the main language of AI used to be Python and Python only, right? Very quickly, that's changed. In the last 6 months, rapidly increased towards being more Python, but also largely TypeScript and JavaScript, which makes sense given how popular TypeScript is when it comes to web application development. This was also echoed by Jared Palmer from Vercel recently at his conference, where he called out how the AI engineer of the future is a TypeScript engineer, right? And I also thought that this AI stack from MongoDB was really fascinating to see, where they called out all the leaders in the different parts of the stack. And right on the top, when it comes to programming languages, they mentioned TypeScript and JavaScript alongside Python. So it's not just at Galileo, we've been noticing this, it's across the board. Folks in the industry have been noticing this big shift from core data scientists to actual software engineers coming in and becoming the AI developers of the future, which is super fascinating. But with all of these different developments that have happened, with models becoming more in reach and the cost becoming being more affordable, and more developers and builders coming to the fore, what's the biggest roadblock that we have right now? The biggest roadblock that we keep hearing about is how in this era of non-deterministic software powered by these models, trusting your AI apps is a really major bottleneck. Right? Like if you can't trust that it's actually going to work in production in a great way, it's really hard to productionize anything. And that's where evaluation and observability become really critical parts of the AI application development stack. It's not even a question of it should be or should be not. It's just becoming a very, very important part of building out your applications. Very similar to how testing and QA used to be for software engineering. It's just so much more important for AI application development now. Um, we also saw this interesting statistic from Stack Overflow recently where they talked about the accuracy of their applications, and most people said that they somewhat trust their applications, but a lot of people also had some level of distrust in their AI applications. And this needs to change, right? If you really want to be able to open up the floodgates of innovation with AI, you really need to be able to trust it. And this lack of trust is not completely unfounded. It's happened because of so many examples that we've seen. Like recently, there was this Microsoft-powered chatbot which literally told different kinds of bosses at restaurants that, hey, they can take the owner's tips. Also told landlords that they can discriminate based on the source of income of their tenants. So it actually got into really hot water because it was giving wrong responses. Air Canada, there was this chatbot that gave away a discount to a passenger, and then they got into hot water because of that. But even on a much more serious note, recently a lot of us saw this really, really sad incident where a 14-year-old boy from Florida committed suicide because of the responses from a chatbot in character AI. It is so our actions and what we develop can have very, very um, very scary consequences if there are no guardrails in place. And this goes way beyond just, mere hallucinations. It goes into like maintaining data privacy if you're working in a bank or in a healthcare institution in AI. It goes into making sure that you have the right kind of guardrails for your use case in place. And those guardrails are highly accurate in production, right? It's very, very important. Otherwise, we'll be fast and loose and lead to some really disastrous outcomes for everybody out there, which is exactly why, the power of AI now can be leveraged more than ever before, right? We all have this amazing uh, powerhouse of an instrument in front of us that is easily accessible and is now more and more affordable. But AI has a big measurement problem, right? How do you measure what good looks like and what bad looks like? How that you have to figure that out for your own use cases. And that's really tough to do. That's robust evaluations while building in and in production are extremely, extremely critical. So that's exactly what Galileo, for instance, have been working on for the last many, many years now, for the last 3.5 years in the language model space. Ever since me and my co-founders were at Google AI and Uber AI, working on this there as well. And what we realized over the last year, especially, is we've been hard at work to make sure that we can build an end-to-end evaluation intelligence platform, right? All the way from training and fine-tuning LLMs with the highest quality data using Galileo's data quality algorithms to experimenting and iterating really, really fast before you even productionize anything, whether you're building complex agents, a RAG-based system, it's highly scalable. But as soon as you go into production, evaluations should scale into production with monitoring and debugging. And then finally, protecting them in near real time with an AI firewall with low latencies and low cost. So across the board, you have to have the right kind of guardrails in place, but you also have to have the right system in place such that you can protect your users and also protect your own system from harm. Under the hood for all of this is our Luna evaluation suite, which are metrics backed by AI research but are tailor fit to your business. It's very important when it comes to your guardrails that they are, number one, they should be highly scalable. They should handle production grade throughput, right? We have at Galileo, for instance, we have Fortune 50 customers which have millions of queries every single day coming in. Now, if you have a dozen evaluation guardrails and millions of queries every day, that requires a huge amount of throughput and great ability to work with that level of compute. And so we've built out infrastructure for that. It also has to be customizable. So you can easily build your own evals or choose from a host of SLM or LLM powered evals and control for cost and latency. That's extremely, extremely important. But what we've also noticed through being in the space for a while is, these metrics and these evals in your GPT as a judge, they have a big problem, and that's the last mile measurement problem, right? Where we're noticing that we can see up to like 70%, maybe 80% accuracy sometimes with a lot of these evals that we're building out. But how do you go from 80% to 95% to closer to 100%, which you absolutely need for some of your critical use cases? The problem there is every use case is different, and metrics should not be one size fits all. You can't use the same metric for every single use case in exactly the same way when every single use case is different. So how do you make your evals actually adapt to the different use cases that you have? How can you give the evals feedback that, hey, for this use case, this is how you need to now improve? That's very, very important, right? And so towards that end, based on many, many months of research, I'm really excited to talk about a new update with Luna called Auto Adaptive, where you have smart metrics that automatically improve based on your feedback and usage over time. Right. So I'm super excited to announce Auto Adaptive Luna evals. We'll have another session which will go much deeper into this. But essentially, this is powered by what we call the continuous learning through human feedback, or CLHF workflow, where you can provide direct feedback in a UI to your metrics to automatically and improve it over time. And what better way to actually introduce this than literally showing it to you really quickly? So we'll do a quick demo here. With a very simple use case. The use case is a Q&A bot for kids, where it's very simple, right? I want to ask a question like, what are plants? What is math? And I want an answer which is explaining it to me like I'm 5 years old, right? I'm using a very, very simple system, which is a simple prompt, GPT-4o model, and VV8 as the vector store. The goal here is to evaluate the responses and ensure that they're adhering to the context that was provided in the prompt. Super simple use case. But I want to make sure that the metric that I'm using here, the evaluation metric, which is context adherence, I want that to be highly accurate, right? So if I find some weird false positives here and there, I want to do something about it. Today, if you realize with your AI apps, when you see something going wrong with your metrics, we can't do anything. We just sit there, twiddle our thumbs, and we're like, I guess we just have to live with this now. But how do you take action on that? So let's dive in. For this simple use case, let's say I did a quick run with Galileo using my test set, using this specific system. What I can see over here in Galileo is a bunch of different inputs. This is my test set, all the outputs on the model. I can also see on the left-hand side over here, a bunch of alerts that are directly auto-computed by Galileo about high cost or high latency or low context adherence. So you can see all of the different inputs and the outputs here. Now, let's go into one of them. Let's go into the first one to see what's going on. As you can see, it's super simple. We're not even using, it's not an agentic system. We're not even using different kinds of chains here. Super, super simple. The prompt here is use the context and answer the query. The query is explain math to me like I'm 5 years old. The context here is missing, right? And therefore the context adherence, which is basically is the response adhering to the context. Because the context is missing, the context adherence score should be 0, which it is. So great. And you can see here that the explanation that's provided by Galileo for why the metric said what it said also says the same thing, that, hey, there's no context. So it's context adherence is 0. So this works. This is great. The next query, we can see here, the context again is missing. The query is explain plants to me like I'm 5 years old. The response seems pretty good, actually. But the context adherence score is not 0, which is strange because there is no context again. And if you look at the response from the model, the explanation from the model, it basically says that, hey, right, I kind of know the right answer. Even though the context is missing, the answer is correct, right? And we want to basically tell this eval metric that, no, that's not true. Like the feedback here is the context is missing. You have to say that the context is missing and the answer and the response should be 0%. That's the only way as an eval metric, you will be more accurate. So typically I wouldn't have any action to take here, but here in this case, I can actually directly in the UI, take some action and auto improve this metric. So I click auto improve metric. I want to be able to provide my feedback. I might be a product manager or an SME, and in just natural language, I just pour my heart out over here, right? And I just mentioned that, look, no context is provided in the prompt. So this cannot be context adherent. Always rate prompts without context as non-adherent and clearly state that as the reasoning for the explanation. And I enter that and I hit submit for auto learning. And that's it. I do this over and over again for any other false positives that I might see. And you can see here that still says 66.67%, which is incorrect. So now I can go in here and say, look, I already provided feedback for this one row. I can do a few things. I can either retune for this one row. I can recalculate context adherence for the entire run across all the queries, or I can recalculate and retune context adherence for all the different runs across all of my projects in this ELI 5 agents project, right? For this, in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to recalculate for this particular run. I hit recalculate for this run. It's happening behind the scenes. Essentially, what Galileo is doing now behind the scenes is auto instruction tuning the context adherence metric. And you can see that within a few seconds, it's going to rerun and now auto update for all of the different rows with that particular piece of feedback, right? So now imagine you doing this for your own LLM as a judge metric for, let's say, sales or accounting for your specific use case. And you can now provide feedback directly in the UI and improve it increasingly, going from that 80% accuracy to 95% accuracy. We finally give you the tools to be able to do this in a really fast and meaningful way. This is already going to be used by some of our customers. It's rolling out to all of our customers in the next week. So if you're excited by this and a lot more research-based evaluation that's happening at Galileo, please feel free to reach out. But speaking of customers, I'm super excited to also have Vinnie here today. Vinnie and the emerging technology team at Twilio they've been doing some really interesting work with Galileo, but overall, in terms of the different work in AI that they've been doing for the last many, many months now. I'm excited for him to tell you more about all the high ROI work that's happening at Twilio and all his learnings along the way as well. So welcome, Vinnie, and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Vikram. I am so excited to be here today. I work at Twilio. I'm on the emerging tech and innovation team. And before we get going, I just want to like express my gratitude for the Galileo team for having me here today, and for my teammates over at Twilio. You guys are rock stars. So a little bit about Twilio. If you don't know who Twilio is, we are a communications platform. We provide APIs for all of your customer engagement, and we do it at a very large scale. We serve 14 trillion API calls in 2023. We did 20 billion voice calls, 2 trillion emails we sent. We do a lot of communications. We know communications. But the number one thing that we are trusted for, we're trusted by over 300,000 of you at many of these companies that you see here on the screen. And as Vikram was saying, the number one thing that we actually sell at Twilio is trust. Trust is paramount for us. Um, Trust is literally the most important thing that we sell. And customers choose Twilio because they know that we'll always do the right thing for them, right? Our customers put a lot of trust into Twilio. And some of you are probably our customers. What do you trust us with, right? Like, not just the great tech that we have. We do have great APIs, of course. You trust us for your privacy concerns and your security concerns and your compliance and, of course, your reliability. But most importantly, like, your data, your data is very important. Your customers' data is very important to you. Your customers' data is very important. At Twilio, we are a B2B company. However, we do have B2B to B to B to C maybe. And so pretty quickly, this chain of trust gets pretty long. And so how do we guide our customers to the next phase of what's going on in this industry? We decided to make a team. And we didn't know the answers to a lot of these questions, right? And so we decided to make a team, the Emerging Tech and Innovation team at Twilio. And what this team is about is really just, how do we get Twilio to where we're going to be in the next 3 years? Like, where does Gen AI look like in 3 years? And how does that play with how you're going to communicate with your customers? We're inspired by other research teams, and we take an open and research-based approach to this. And so our philosophy is like, let's get our work out in the open. Let's get good feedback. Let's get early feedback, and let's build something amazing. We started this a small team started this in early 2023, and we expanded our membership towards the end of 2023. And it was around this time when I met Galileo. I went back to look this up. It was actually December 27th, 2023. So if anyone's out there saying nothing gets done between, Christmas and New Year's, not at Galileo and Twilio. Okay. So I'm going to take you through a couple of things that, I've learned on this team and our team has learned in bringing Gen AI to production. These skills have been really critical for us. So I'm going to go through them just sort of one by one. Flexibility. So when you have a team, and like Vikram said, like, a lot of us have never worked with AI before or Gen AI before, or, we might not even understand like half the things that ML engineers are talking about, because I am not an ML engineer. I'm a backend engineer. I'm a full stack engineer. I'm a security engineer, but I'm definitely not an ML engineer. Maybe these days a little bit closer, but at the beginning, definitely not. So these skill sets are very new to a lot of people. And the key thing that I found here is that, like, find ways that, your testing looks like your other testing. For example, like when we talk about evals, like, what part of testing does that cover? Is that the unit tests maybe, or is that the integration tests, or is that the end-to-end tests? Like, a lot of this world still looks the same, right? We still have testing, we still have security, we still have load testing, we still have scalability. But all of these things are just normal, engineering things. Well, what's new here then? Well, for example, like, just the phrase "the vector space" is new. Like, I had to learn what that is. We had to know about embedding models. I work in security, and so one of the most fun parts for me is like the subtle interactions between like prompt injections and data poisoning and RAG and like all that stuff. Like, this is a whole new thing, and it really requires you to be flexible. Um, the second thing is, like, find people who are really willing to just like jump into the abyss with you, right? And I'm not talking about people who will like stand at the edge with you. I'm talking about find people who have a compulsion to understand and find what's down at the bottom of that abyss, right? Like, this field is wide open, And standing at the edge just means you're just sort of waiting for someone to figure out how to fix your problem. And, in this field where everything is wide open, like it might be likely that, that your unique problem might actually be a problem that other people are trying to fix too, and just haven't gotten around to it. So be the ones to go in there and find out why. Why isn't it built yet? Maybe you can go build it. Go find people who are building it too. Along the same lines, like, exploration has been critical to our team. We read and share papers constantly. We are always like looking to see what you all are building out there and how that, maybe could apply to us. Try the newest models. Go find out, like, do the benchmarks line up? Like, is that actually true? Like, how does that apply to your situation? And the last one, exercise patience. Um, this one's been really critical to our success, I think, and, like, the obviously, the field is moving very quickly, and if you go on LinkedIn, like, you'll find, every day there's, people doing, awesome stuff. The trick is, like, understanding when and how to use that stuff that you find, like, while you're exploring, right? Like, if, you find a new model that's, 1% better in this thing, doesn't necessarily mean that, like, you have to go and implement that right away. Maybe not. Uh, does your application, like, actually care about those things? Like, maybe not. Um, this is like, Vikram was saying, like, non-determinism is a big thing, and it's like one of the biggest things that we challenge that we face every day. Be wary of the second and third order effects of, the changes that you're making, because, you might not really be able to know, unless you have like a evaluation suite that is, like, very comprehensive. You might not be able to know if you've, maybe broken one of your use cases, that's like a long tail use case. So let's talk about why we partner with Galileo, because that's sort of why we're here today. I want to tell you a story about the first time I met Yash. And like I said, I met Yash at the end of 2023. And I remember he was showing me LLM Studio at the time, and he's giving me a demo of, observe and all, or evaluate and all that stuff. And honestly, I had no idea what he was talking about, like, most of the time. And my Google Doc was just full of notes about things to look up afterwards. And at the end, I was like, actually, I think observe is kind of the thing we're looking for. And Yash was like, okay, cool. Like, what's your use case? And I'm like, well, we're building a platform. I'm not really sure, what our use cases will be. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, how many users do you have? And I'm like, well, none. He's like, well, what are they going to build? Like, this is not gonna be a satisfying answer for you, man. So we didn't really know upfront, right? And so the point I'm trying to make here is, like, when I started talking to Yash and started talking to the Galileo team, it was immediately obvious that I could trust them, right? It was immediately obvious to me that their engineering background was exactly what we needed, and what they were building was a guide frame, like a framework for exactly what we wanted to do. Like, what does it look like for teams to use this, right? You have evaluation, observe, protect, fine tune. Like, all of those things to me, when I saw it for the first time, were like, hey, this is what this team looks like a year from now. This is what this team looks like 2 years from now. How do we grow into that? And that comes to the breadth of offerings, right? Like, Galileo just offers so much for a team. Like, you might not use all of it, we use observe very, very heavily. It's the one of the main things that we use. You might use evaluate as your primary thing. You might use protect as your primary thing. But the thing here is that, like, this, the platform that they're building really gives you everything that you need to build a team around Gen AI. And then the last thing is, the Luna insights are amazing. We can find things that we wouldn't really be able to find elsewhere, right? Like, we can implement logging, and we can, find errors and when they happen in stack traces and stuff. But, like, is a hallucination really like an application error? Um, Not according to, like, the things that throw errors. Like, it's not going to be a stack trace there. So how do we find out? Like, how is that? Why is it hallucinating? That is where, all these the Luna metrics come in. We can isolate specific requests. Like, this context adherence is really low. This correctness is really low. Like, let's go figure out, like, why for this particular request that happened. Yeah, I kind of just went over this a little bit, but, like, in terms of, like, how we actually use Galileo, Observe is our main thing. We use Observe for engineering. Our product teams use Observe. We find bugs in RAG here. We find bugs with parallel tool calling. I was just doing that the other day. And the product team uses this as like a first line of investigation. It's very easy for them to look at a query and see the output, and maybe not necessarily all of the steps in between. That's but the engineers we definitely look at that, but like it's very easy for other people to get in there and sort of figure out what's happening, even if you're not looking at all the steps. Protect trust is paramount. Trust is the most important thing we do, right? Like if you are not protecting your inputs and outputs, then I'm sorry to say you might be in for a bad time. Um, Evaluate. Again, this is like so for us. We used observe primarily, and evaluate. When we looked at it the first time, we knew that there was something there for us to use, but for us, like a one-to-one mapping is not necessarily like the most important thing because we're building a platform. Um, we want variance. Like it's okay. Like variance is okay for us. What we really care about is the task completed, right? Like given this task, did you get to the end and complete it? And how did you do that? Right? Like this is sort of where we're looking at for evaluate, being able to evaluate a little bit more in detail around like not just input and output, but input and all of the outputs that led to a particular ending point. Like that's sort of where we're thinking about moving in that direction. Um, that's pretty much all I have today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and I really appreciate you coming to listen to me talk. This was my first ever conference talk, so I'm just thrilled. And come check out the panel discussion a little bit later, where we're going to have a lot more to talk about, like technical details. Thanks a lot, everybody.